All right, the orality literacy continuum, for me, sets the stage for understanding why we need to be storytellers, okay? And I'd like to go over this with you as sort of the, as the basis for why we think orality and the components of orality have a huge role to play in the way that we relate and communicate to other people. And I'd like to go through this. Now, I use the term illiterate not in any kind of a pejorative way, all right? What we are talking about when we talk about the continuum is we are not talking about intelligence, okay? So the fact that someone is literate or not literate reveals very little about that person's intelligence. Rather, what it does is it reveals the opportunities that they've had to become educated and go through an education system. And for most of us, we've had the opportunity to do that. But for about 70% of the world, they've had very little opportunity to do that, okay? And so I want us to look at the categories, get a sense of what they're like, and then we're going to talk about the National Adult Literacy Survey that was done at Princeton, and we're going to apply all of this and come to see why I think orality needs to be a key piece of how we do work and communicate. Illiterate is obviously a person who probably has had no education. Certainly in the way that we're using it today, they've had no education. This is a person who had, for whatever reason, lived in remote parts of the world, just no chance to ever go to school. And, you know, they don't read anything. A word to them is something that you hear with your ear, and it goes in and it goes away, all right? Whereas words for you and me tend to mean something in print or something that we can go back and get again. So an illiterate person is a person who simply never had exposure to education. And there are still people like that in the world. Most of the world is not this category, but there are people that are far enough away from, you know, civilization as we think of it that they've had no access. Now, functionally illiterate people are people that have had normally up to the 8th grade in education. But whenever, for whatever reason, they didn't get a chance to go further than that. And in Africa, one of the reasons that was very typical for this was either families ran out of money or daughters especially became marriable at this age, okay? They became marriable. And so families that were on a dowry system that were often very poor, their daughter was like a cash crop, if I can say it that way. I don't mean it. I'm not looking down on that system. It's just that's kind of what she was. They needed cows, they needed money, and a daughter represented that. And so there were a number of girls who would go through the 8th grade, but then they would be married off to a man, and within 2 years of not continuing to have exposure to education, within 2 years of that, they would revert to what we call functional illiteracy. Now, a functionally illiterate person will surprise you, because if you handed them a document and said, could you read a few words from that? They certainly could. And if you asked them, could you, sign your name on this check? They certainly could do that. And so there are signs that when we meet them, we think this person's literate because they can do those things. But these are people that are essentially just like illiterates when it comes to the way that they think and communicate the things that are really important to them, all right? So governments often, man, they count these people whenever, they're applying for money from the IMF, and the IMF's more likely to make a loan to a government if they have a better chance of paying it back. And the better their literacy rate, they figure the better their chance of paying it back. And so all these people get counted whenever, by nations. Not only that, but you have to keep in mind the fact that for many of these people, the schools that they went to were one-room mud buildings where maybe a teacher had a book and wrote everything up on the board, and the students, if they had a notebook, they would write those same things down. Nobody had a book. There were no taxes. The teachers were not highly trained. These are not school systems like what you and I went through in the 8th grade, okay? Far from it. And this is fairly common, even though I'm speaking out of an African experience, this is fairly common in many parts of the world, all right? And my guess is there's not much of this in the United States, but we might find a pocket of that somewhere. We would still possibly find a pocket of this somewhere in our nation. And so just keep in mind the fact that all 8th grade educations are not equally valuable, all right? And so this person can read the words on the page, but they will not comprehend basically anything that they would have read, okay? Now, a third category is semi-literate, and this is a person that has had 10 years of education. And this person was really common to us in many parts of East Africa. They were not the majority by any means, but we met a number of people like this, especially in our church work overseas. We met a lot of people like this because it was common for guys to be able to go on. Maybe they could get past the 8th grade and get a little bit of high school education, but then maybe parents would run out of money or you know, whatever, for whatever reason, about 10 to 12 years there, sorry, 10 to 12 years for semi-literate. They might even graduate. These are people who could definitely read stuff, and here's how you sort of make the distinction in semi-literacy. And remember, we're not talking about intelligence here at all. When I came home, you know, on furloughs, of course, we love to go to Walmart, you know, I mean, I never go to Walmart anymore now that I live in America, hardly. But man, we lived there when we came home, you know, from Africa. It was awesome. And occasionally we'd go back into the auto section to get new tires put on a car. Okay, so everybody, can you transport there with me? Can you see the auto section in Walmart? A lot of you been there? And so you'd go up to the guy or the gal, and you would tell them, okay, I think I want these, you know, Michelin whatever, Dunlop or whatever, you know, good BF Goodrich, and they'd type it into the computer, right? And then they'd ask you a series of questions, the person behind the computer. Do you want those balanced? Yes, I want them balanced. Would you like new plugs in your tire? Yeah, okay, go ahead and do that. Do you want the, you know, the warranty package on it? Nah, I don't, you know, I don't want that. That's too expensive. And so they type all that stuff in. They put in your automobile license plate number, everything like that. Then they hit a button and it prints it out, and that printout goes into a metal wire tray. That's what I remember. Maybe they've upgraded, but that's what I remember. Okay? Then the guy comes from the back somewhere, out of the shop, and he goes and you're next. And so he gets your printout, and he goes in the back room there, and he gets 4 tires off the shelves, and he gets the correct car, and he puts everything on just the way it's planned, and he signs his name or initials or however he does it to show, yep, the job is done, and you get in and you drive away a satisfied customer. All right? This person, we would say, yep, absolutely literate. Read everything on the form correctly, got the correct vehicle, did everything correctly. But when that person goes home, that person probably isn't picking up a book reading it. Not saying they're not, but probably are not. And if you were to hand that person a document and let them read an article, say, out of the newspaper, and say, now, summarize, if you would, for me, what that article was about, chances are they wouldn't be very comfortable doing that. Okay? Semi-literacy is someone who has a capacity to they function literately within certain parameters. And usually these are parameters related to work and things like that. Things that they do all the time, repetitive things, constantly. They're doing it over and over again, and they function very well at this level, okay? That's what we're thinking of when we're thinking of somebody who's semi-literate. They have literacy skills, not functionally illiterate. They have literacy skills, but they're limited. Then, this is a person who usually is a 4-year graduate of a university. Okay? 4-year graduate of a university. And how many of you in the room are you're at least, you would, okay, a lot of you. All right, and so, you know what I'm talking about. When you got your degree, you wrote your papers. You may not have written the best papers in the world, but so what? You know, you got your degree, and you intended to use it to, make some kind of a living and stuff like this. The way I like to categorize this person, and I am categorizing, but the way I like to do that is this is the guy who got his degree, goes to work every day, uses his literacy in various ways, but when he comes home, this guy is watching ESPN, he's watching TV. He's not coming home reading a book. His idea of relaxing and resting is not, I got this novel over here that I'm working my way through, or I'm researching even something on the internet necessarily. This is a person who still uses literacy, but kind of uses their literacy so they don't have to use literacy all the time, right? They can have fun doing other things as well. Then you have high literacy, and these are people who usually will have some kind of a graduate degree. And remember, none of these have anything to do with intelligence. And these are people who earn their living through literacy, okay? They use literacy all the time, and they earn their living through that. And not only do they earn their living using literacy, these would be people like lawyers and professors and pastors that are, preaching and stuff like that. People that are really handling fresh stuff all the time. But these people, when they get a chance, a free break, they're maybe reading a book. They love literacy. It's relaxing to them. They just get into their other world, okay? This is your high literate group. Now, in 1990, then President George Herbert Walker Bush, he was concerned that maybe we weren't getting much bang for our buck in terms of our education dollars. And if you guys can remember that far back, that was a while ago, that was a discussion that was, I remember it actually being had. And so President Bush, before 1990, but he commissioned a study called the National Adult Literacy Survey. And they got Princeton University to do this. Because already, as you know, especially if any of you are educators, this is a political hot potato, right? This is. And it's personal, what do you mean I'm not a good teacher and I'm not doing my job? There's just all kinds of stuff tied up in this, and philosophy about how education really happens well and stuff. So President Bush said, yeah, we're going to do this study. They did it, and they got the results in 1990. The results were so bad, and if you remember, Bush was in a political dogfight, right? And the economy had already tanked, and he didn't need any more bad news. And of course, in 92, he lost. But you remember that, if you remember that period of time, this information, this news was so damaging that he simply didn't need any more bad news. And so you know what they did? They shelved it. And nobody knew what the National Adult Literacy Survey said. Well, years later, it came out. I'll never forget where I first saw it. I didn't know anything about the National Adult Literacy Survey. I was home from on furlough, and I was doing one of these things over here, watching the news, and I remember laying down on the floor and, watching TV and reading the stuff going along the bottom as well, right? I don't remember what news channel I was watching. And here's what it said. It said, Americans having difficulty, people having difficulty properly installing their child safety car seats. Dot. The next thing came out. The company, that made them said that they wrote the instructions for a 10th grade reading level. Dot. 50% of Americans read at 8th grade or below. Dot. All right, that was the application of the National Adult Literacy Survey. In the United States of America, 50% of Americans are either illiterate or functionally illiterate. Does that surprise you? Okay. It depends how much exposure you got to the 50%, right? Okay. What do you think this number is? Anybody want to guess? 10%, 25%? Yeah. According to the NALS. And of course, that leaves 20% of the population. Now, let's have a discussion. You tell me, you're all really intelligent people. What does this mean? This means that we are watching a lot of TV. Do you know what Americans are better than anyone in the world at? Watching TV. We're awesome at watching TV. In fact, how many of you in your church on Sunday morning, when the pastor's preaching, his picture's up on the screen? How many of you? Okay, not near enough of you. And this ain't about him. It's about them. How many of you, whenever he's up there, how many of you watch him on the screen instead of watching him live? Yeah. You know why? You're awesome at watching TV. Okay, now, whether you have a problem with that or not, get over that. Okay? I got a problem with that, but let's get over it, because that's not why we're here. America is not going to stop watching TV. It is who we are. It may be the nail in our coffin, but we are not going to quit doing it. Americans are awesome at watching TV, and whenever you watch TV, something happens to you. It literally happens to you. Your brain thinks differently. So the guy or the girl is saying the same thing in the pulpit, right? Making the announcements, preaching the sermon, singing whatever, and you're watching them live or you're watching them on TV, it's different, even though you're in the same room with them. And so we're watching a lot of TV. Americans are really good at that. Okay, here's an implication for us. What does that mean for how we do church? If you're not using any TV, if you're not using any video pieces, components in your services on Sunday morning, you're missing a really great chance, because Americans are very good at watching TV. Whatever you want them to get, if you will show it to them in video format, they will get it better than if you just stand there and tell them. Whether you like that or not. It's fact. It's true. Okay, give me another implication of this. Because somebody, do you think that most people who watch TV, do you think they live the way they live as a result of the media input that they get? Okay, then, Dawn, I think I know what you mean, and I'm not picking on you. Are you okay with me talking? Okay. But I think they are living it. Rather than it not informing and affecting the way people live, I think it powerfully affects the way they live. What we're suggesting, what I think is significant out of what Richard's suggesting, is that as North America becomes more oral, it's changing the very fundamental type of society that we are. That's the power of orality. If you and I ignore that because we think the content isn't right, all I'm saying, then we ignore it to their detriment and to ours. If we use this, though, if we were to use this on behalf of the gospel, it could be a very powerful tool on behalf of the gospel. So when you get into a culture, Missionary 101 says what? You got to communicate the way the people communicate, and you got to understand their culture, right? Otherwise, it's ships in the night. You're talking to each other, but nothing's happening. You're missing one another completely. Okay. All right, tell me something else that you see from this. Which side of the equation is more concerned about relationship? Left. Absolutely the left, right? Hey, you know what? I don't really need you. Because I got my wallet, I got my phone, I got my own car, I got a pretty good paying job. H-E-B and Randall's still has food on the shelf. I don't need you. I got nothing. I can't survive without you. Let me just give you the example out of Africa, okay? But it's true here too. Let me start there, because this is so classic. By definition, to be appointed as an IMB missionary, which category did I have to be in? I had to be in this because this is better. Okay, we got to have some kind of standard, right? And so this is the IMB standard. I had to have a 4-year degree, I had to have seminary graduate degree, and I had to have 2 years experience when I was appointed. That was a long time ago. Nobody has to do that anymore. And Linda had to have 60 hours minimum. Okay, she had to have at least 60 hours here, which is an associate's degree. And in her case, she's got a bachelor's degree in nursing. Okay, now we're going and we're working in the slums of Nairobi. Where do you think most of the people in the slums of Nairobi would be on this chart? Absolutely, right? Do you see the problem? Okay, so let's add on to that the fact that I was appointed in 90, and if anybody remembers, in 90, we had just sort of finished fighting the battle for the Bible, okay? And I was a fundamentalist, I want to tell you that. And so, I'm still a fundamentalist, but as my mentor told me, John, the more you believe the Word, the more gracious you get with people, all right? So I still believe the fundamentals of the faith, but I don't treat people the way I used to treat them. I was so proud of what I knew. And that came out in all kinds of ways. I preached at the larger churches in Nairobi, and I can tell you these people, they loved it. They'd never heard any stuff like that before. And I'm going to give Dave a lot of credit for that. They loved it, and they invited me back and back and back. But could they do any of that? Nothing. I wasn't reproducing anything. What I was doing is I was feeding candy, and they liked it. Okay, there's a place for feeding candy in church. There really is. Some of you aren't, I can already tell, some of you aren't going to like that, but that's okay. There's a place for feeding candy. Because what happened was when I fed candy over here, some young men started coming around like, hey, you want to hang out? Okay, what's hanging out all about? That's all about relationships. So, you know, candy was a good thing, right? We know that from Vacation Bible School. We know it from bus ministry. Okay, let's use everything to the advantage of the gospel. And for the longest time, we had a hard time with that. You know, if the motive was wrong, we wouldn't use it. Use any motive for the sake of the gospel. You can quote me on that. All right. So I would preach, and they loved it. But then, when they came to me, what do you think I did with them? I did what I knew. I did what had been done with me, right? I gave away what I had. So here's what happened to us. We began to have this conversation. And these churches were not unwise. They knew that they had to send their most educated people to us. Were these their best leaders? Do you know what the word elder means, first and foremost? Old. Yeah, mature, quality of life, all that. But first, it means old. You know who came to us? All the boys. Okay, that's fine. Youth are often at the forefront of movements and things that change, right? I mean, look at the Arab Spring. They are. So there's nothing wrong with that. But they didn't send their really best leaders to us. They didn't send their recognized, influential people to us. They sent their most educated because we were over here. Okay, we are so happy. These people want to be like us. Makes me feel pretty good about myself, right? Okay, so we get into these conversations with them, and I think I'm doing the work that's going to make a difference. And I'm teaching them what I know, and they're going to Bible school with us, and they're going to seminary with us, and I'm passing on all this stuff, and they want to be just like me, and that makes me feel good. And then some of them, here's what happened. You won't be surprised by this. Some of them got sent over here to us, maybe for good reasons, but when they kind of got in our world, they wanted to stay in our world, right? And so they found it very hard to go back to this world because it's hot and sweaty and a lot of flies, and ain't much good over there in terms of just basic living, right? Some of them weren't like that, though. And they would go back to their world, and when they got here and now they're having this thing, what do you think they're doing? They're giving away what they got. How's that working for them? It's not working. It's not working. Okay, now, what's the American version of that? Where are you guys sending all your boys and girls to get, to the seminary, right? And who do they want to be like? Well, I don't know. Any of y'all professors in here? Okay, we can talk about them then. I don't know how many of my professors, see, if Grant were here, he couldn't do this, but I was lower on the grade scale than him, so I can get away with it. But you tend to want to be like the people who influence you. And so now our churches, our programs, our ministries, our ideas about what church is and how you do church and how you give the gospel away, now it's coming from this side of the line, and that's why I moved that over. I wanted this division here, and we're giving it to people. And are they getting it? By and large, they're not. The percentages would tell us they're not. So what has to happen? Yes.
You have to learn their language and then speak it.
Yes. Yeah. We got to learn language. What else do we have to learn? You guys are going right down the path I wanted to go down. This is awesome. What else? Culture. Okay, how many of you watched the Academy Awards last night? How many of you? Almost none of you. How many of you liked it? You don't care for it. So what? Most of America watched it. Okay, how many of you watched the NBA All-Star game?
Yeah.
Only, okay, well, everybody else was watching that. Okay. So all of Houston was watching the Academy Awards and the NBA All-Star game last night, and 5 of us. And the reason I watched it is I don't have TV at my house, and so I got to the hotel, oh, I get to watch TV, So I watched and I went between the two, right? So when there's a commercial here, I'm over there. I don't know any of these films. I don't know almost any of the people. I've been in Africa. I don't know. But I can tell you, I'm out of touch. At my church, at BRCC, I'm completely out of touch because I don't have TV. I don't know the people they talk about. I don't know the songs they reference. I mean, our own staff. I don't know it. And I think something's got to happen about that, because if you don't know the language and you don't know the culture, game over. This is huge. This is missions 101. Language, culture. Okay, now, so let me tell you what I did with the people that came into my area. I was the strategy coordinator, facilitator for the northern frontier. So that was northwest Kenya, northern Uganda, and southern Sudan. And where do you think most of my people that we were responsible for, where do you think they were on the chart? They were really over here. I mean, they were heavily over here, right? And I got missionaries that are coming from here. So what I did, well, just let me ask you, what do you expect the missionaries that you send overseas and you support them, what do you expect them to do first?
Learn the language.
Okay, first they need to leave America. They need to get out of America, and they need to get some of America out of them. Because these are two different worlds. Okay? Secondly, you expect them to learn the language. Would it hurt your feelings if I told you that a lot of your missionaries don't know the language? Yeah. Okay, then you expect them to learn the culture. So what we did in the Northern Frontier is first of all, we put them through a program called 4040. And 4040 was designed to, get them out of America and get some of America out of them. And we taught them to get over their fear of relating to other people. Because it's very easy to go all the way around the world pretty jacked up about being a missionary. And you know what? The hardest 50 feet, 10,000 miles around the world, and the hardest 50 feet are out your own gate. Okay, you got to write that one down. That'll preach. Hardest 50 feet are out your own gate. And so the first thing we taught them how to do is just how to get comfortable with getting out their own gate, because they're often afraid. Understandable. It's new. It's different. Then we started learning how to learn language, and we used some new approaches to that. But language is just all about getting face-to-face with people, right? And you know the lousy thing about language is you can have a really good day today on learning a new language, and so you know what's going to happen tomorrow? You're going to go back, and it's all new again, because you're not going to learn what you learned yesterday. You're going to learn something you don't know, which means every day you're learning something new, and you're starting over, you're a beginner every day. Do you know what it's like to go back and not be able to talk to people, and little kids come up to you and you have no idea what they said, And you're the adult, but you don't feel like one anymore, right? And so there's a struggle with learning language, because how many of you have learned a second language? Okay. But do you remember what it was like whenever you got to go back and speak your own language? With friends? It's like, this is so easy. I'm so good when I can talk my own language. But if I try to do what I'm doing right now in Kiswahili, okay, it's been a few years. Okay, I could do it. But it's been a while. And I would forget words and there's things you can think it here, but you can't make it come out. And it's frustrating. And so language is it's one of the harder things that anybody ever tries to do. You would do the IMB a great favor if people who are prospective missionaries out of your churches, if you would help them test out before they apply to see if they have an aptitude to learn language. You would really help. You would spend your money better. Okay? No knock on that person at all. None. But you'd help if you sent them people that had an aptitude for learning languages. And that's knowable before they apply. Then, culture. What we did is the first 3 years of your missionary career, this is all we asked of you. And so then you had to take some standard categories that we had for culture, and you had to actually have interviews with people talking about those categories and recording what you wrote down. And over a 3-year period, as you're doing that, you know what else you're doing, which is our key for the week together, and some of you have mentioned already, you're building relationships with people, right? Because all of a sudden, instead of being a knower, you become what? A learner. This is huge. We love being learners. Knowers. Why do we like being knowers?
Ego.
Yeah, ego makes me feel good about myself, comfortable. Yeah. And when I'm a learner, I'm uncomfortable with all of that. And so This forces us to become a learner again. And so we'd learn their culture. And then out of this, we would ask them to identify the major bridges and barriers. That ring a bell with anybody? Sally, have they had this part yet?
Those who have been to GCI have had it.
Okay, if you've been to GCI, you've heard about bridges and barriers, right, for church planting movement. And so we would help them identify the major bridges and barriers in their own culture, and then we would ask them to develop, and this is just a theory, but to develop a model of church that could succeed in that culture, that had a chance of reproducing, that it would look, sound, feel, and smell like them when they walked in. Everything that is true in Africa is true here, right? It's the people in the bus stop on 34th this morning. I mean, we had several problems. They were all people of color. I'm white. Even if I want to go talk to them, what's the first thing that's going to happen? I don't know if I trust you, right? And they have reason.